And here we are. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world watching. Today we are live on Solution Sunday because the soul is the solution. I am Lisa Warner. I am the author of The Simplicity of Self-Healing, the creator of Solution Sunday, and the creator of soul embodiment, bringing the soul into the body so we can live our very best lives as the beings that we truly are here on this planet. And today we are talking about the new age. We all know that we are moving into a new age on this planet, that we are moving up in vibration, that we are stepping into a whole new paradigm so that we can start creating heaven on earth. And in order to do that, we have to start to change the way we look at things so the things we look at can change. And one of the biggest things that we need to be able to change the way we look at is aging. Do we actually have to age? Do we have to get older? Do we have to end up in nursing homes without being able to take care of ourselves? Is that actually the path that we need to take? Today we are here with Lee Mowatt. He is a septuagenarian, and you would never ever know that from looking at him. And Lee has got some amazing ways of changing the way we look at aging. So Lee, it is a pleasure to meet you on this show, and we have mutual friends, but we haven't been able to meet in person. So I'm super excited to have you here today. Welcome.
I am excited to be here today. You and I have spoken online many times, but this is the first time we are speaking in this venue, and it's my pleasure to do so. It is also my pleasure to address your audience and to help share some of the elements of my story that could possibly resonate with them for their inspiration as well. So I'm so glad to be here today.
Well, you are certainly an amazing inspiration. You know, I have watched many of your videos online where you are doing gymnastic things, standing on your head, doing all kinds of, iron crosses on the rings. And I mean, my goodness, you are far stronger than the majority of 20-year-olds.
That is, that stuff may be true. I don't know really how to present that because that's not really for everyone to take on. As you know, I've been a gymnast as a child, and then I stopped being a gymnast when I hit 33 because it's too rigorous on my body. But then when I was 54, I had a very, very devastating accident. I was broken from head to toe, spleen, lungs. They wanted to amputate my leg because it was never going to work again, according to their advice. So my wife at the time said, do not amputate that leg. The leg was pulverized between my motorcycle and a 2-ton Buick, and it was just shattered. And so when the doctor saw this, he said, it needs to be amputated. My wife refused to allow that. My wife at the time refused to allow that. And I am grateful for that decision to this very day because it was able to come back. I was able to prove the doctors wrong about not using that leg again. And so, however, in physical therapy, I had to go through physical therapy. And instead of doing their physical therapy, I returned to my youthful gymnastics to try to help revitalize that leg again. And I was, at this point, I'm 54 years old, trying to return to a younger child sport, but no matter, I was able to do so much more than I thought I should be able to do. My whole conception of what I was started to change at that point in time. I didn't know that I could get as strong as I could. I just didn't know that. I started to suspect that as I started to gain strength and started to do things that people started to be amazed at. And then when I saw their amazement, I said, well, maybe they're right. Maybe I'm, But yeah, physical therapy, I went well beyond physical therapy. The leg and several other injuries during that time continued to give me problems for many years. I carried an open wound, which the doctor said would never heal. Again, we proved the doctors wrong. After 7 years, that leg started to heal, and I have the body's own regenerative capabilities to thank for that. We'll talk about that a little bit. And yeah, so returning to my gymnastic ways as a youth, and this accident turned out to be one of the biggest blessings of my life. I discovered so much about who I am and who we all are. During that time, Lisa, I saw so many people heal from tremendous injuries. And I realized that there is a spiritual component to healing. There is, this spiritual component, because I saw people healing that I could not identify this spiritual component in, and I saw people healing that I could identify, and the difference was night and day. The difference was night and day. And this story continues on in later life because I've had other injuries. As you know, I'm a very adventurous sort of person, and having injuries, well, I have recovery down to routine at this point in time. And so, I've had, for example, I had a stroke at the end of 2015. It wasn't a very bad stroke, but again, I discovered other things. Every event like this has been a blessing in my life. This stroke was another time to reset. These injuries, these recovery sessions were time to reset, not time to step back. They were time to reset who I was and to move forward in a stronger manner. I discovered neuroplasticity during my stroke. Now, we all know what neuroplasticity is, or most of us do anyway. When anytime the brain is not able to do something that it used to be able to do, it finds another way to do this. And I discovered how I can trigger that capability inside my own brain. Again, being an athlete from a younger child, I knew that practice was the way to make the brain remember. And I was able to eliminate almost all of my stroke deficits by neuroplasticity, triggering neuroplasticity. And I developed the following phrase from that time. I said, anytime you do what you cannot do, you can always do it better each time you do it. Doing what you cannot do helps you to do it better. Yeah, until you can't say you can't do it anymore. And so I was able to, when I got out of the hospital for my stroke, I couldn't understand my hands. I couldn't write my name. And on my website, I have my name when I first came to the hospital, and then practice, practice, practice. I have each day you can see my name improve, improve, and improve until my handwriting now today is almost better than it was before. And so I started to gain faith in my own ability to be the person I wanted to be. This internal confidence of my own ability to heal made me more fearless. No idea. So, but there's just so many things to talk about. I'm amazed at the human body. The human body has just been a tremendous, tool for me, for others. And Lisa, what I've discovered is that every mystery that sits inside the grander universe also exists out of our bodies as well. There's the things that manipulate the universe out there are the same things that manipulates our bodies in here. The forces are identical, and for me, nature is the answer. For me, nature is my answer. People come to me and ask me, how do I keep my weight, et cetera, et cetera. And my answer is the same. Have you ever seen a fat fish? If you've never seen a fat fish, there is your answer. If you've never seen a fat eagle, there is your answer. That's how I keep my weight. I live close to nature, as close to nature as I can. And I have no idea what to, I don't have a lot of wrinkles. I'm not sure why. Perhaps you can tell me why I don't. I don't know. But you yourself has been through a tremendous adventure with your cancer. I've read your book, and these blessings that we are given, you, your cancer, me, my stroke, my accident, these are tremendous avenues in our life to understand deeper, better, and further to help us advance who we are as human beings. I would like to, for me, I would like to go on because I can go on and on about this stuff. And so I need you to stop me to answer all the questions because I have no idea which angle you would like me to speak from. There are just so many angles to speak from here. So
You're doing great. It's such a, I love that you're talking about being back in harmony with nature. I
yes,
was having this conversation with some friends yesterday, talking about if we weren't sent off to school to receive all of the mental gymnastics that we receive going through school, we would be learning how to live in harmony with nature. We would be learning how to live off the land. We would be learning how to live in harmony with the animals and the plants and the cycles and the seasons. But we have been literally disconnected from
absolutely.
nature. Look at the people that grow up in a city and they've never even seen nature other than maybe in a little park. And it's so sad.
It really is. And I've discovered that the closer our bodies have a strong tendency to lean toward perfection.
Exactly.
We have if we allow our bodies to do what they're designed to do, it tends to be toward perfection.
Yes.
But the way we live, the way we think, the way, the environment is not as close to nature as our bodies were designed to be. Therefore, we have a lot of strangeness around us, sickness, mental situations, physical situations, because we are so far away from nature.
Exactly.
The more we stay close to nature, the more perfect our bodies tend to be. Now, when I say perfect, I'm not talking about everyone looking like an Adonis or something like that. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about health. Health and physique are two different things.
Correct. Yes.
You know, and so I may have a decent physique, but that doesn't mean that's separate from health. And by living close to nature, we're talking about healthy living, and our bodies will respond to that. And so, you know, when we live away from nature, as we can, many of us do live away from nature, and these are the ones that will feel depressed. These are the ones that may, you know, our bodies are perfect in their response. Cancer is a response, as you have said yourself. Cancer is a natural response to the body. A cold is a natural response of the body to outside elements. We have toxins in our environments, and we can respond to this in a perfect way.
Exactly.
And
And we've
so
been taught to fear these things.
exactly.
Which is just the most insidious disservice to humanity that I can possibly imagine, to make us fear our body's natural responses.
I've spoken to so many people, and I try to help them understand. They wake up with a pain or two, and they'll worry about that pain.
Yeah.
And you know, I myself may wake up with a pain, and I trust my body to take care of it. I trust my body to help me understand what it is, if it's something I should be concerned about at all. Most times it's not. And to take care of this. And I've watched so many things heal quite naturally. Um, as I mentioned earlier, I was carrying an open wound on my foot for about 7 years. I learned how to take care of that open wound from the accident of 2004, and so that it would not be infected. And after a while, it started to heal in ways that the doctors said it would never heal. The reason I carried that open wound is because when they did the skin graft on my foot, there was a portion of my foot where the skin graft did not take, that could not get skin at the heel of my foot. So
Mm.
that did not have skin that would heal. And I carried that around for about 7 years, learning how to take care of an open wound. Well, after a while, after learning how to take care of it, stopping the infections that would happen there, it just happened to heal by itself. And I look at it today and I said, that used to be an open wound. You know, the body's regenerative capabilities are tremendous. And it's not just mine. I've watched other people do this as well. During my accident, I saw soldiers coming back from the war who had tremendous injuries. And I wish them well, but I know that there's a spiritual component. If they were spiritually strong, I'm not talking about religion here. I'm not talking about religion here. If they knew that they were more than who they saw in the mirror. Yeah. When, for example, I define spirituality somewhat differently. When I look at myself in the mirror, I know I am more than that. I know that I am seeing, what I'm seeing is only a portion of me. And the portion of me that I'm not seeing, that portion of me I address through my spiritual approach to life. And that which has become a very, very strong part of my living, the spiritual. So it's not a religious thing.
Oh, yeah,
It's
religion has really distorted spirituality. It has distorted the
absolutely.
spirit and taught us that the soul is somewhere else, that it's off there, and that, maybe we'll be reunited with it, after we die. Like, no, we are the soul right here, right now, always and forever. We are the non-physical consciousness in,
Exactly.
animating these physical bodies.
You're so right there. When I see me in the mirror, I try to see, I can't physically see it, of course. I try to see more than what I'm seeing in the mirror, because that's who I really am. There's a timeless element to you, to me, to everyone else.
Yes.
And I have always been appealing to myself to understand who I am beyond, you know, in fact, I've I've always wanted to be older. I recall at a time when I was 25 and someone asked me what's the perfect age, and I said 50 is the perfect age. I was 25 at the time when I said this, and they asked me, why would 50 be the perfect age? I said, because at 25 I know only this much about myself. And I said, can you imagine how much I'll know about myself at 50? And that knowing myself is the power. Knowing who you are is the power. And so,
Absolutely. The
and
wisest words I've heard in many, many months.
some famous philosopher said, "Know thyself," and I have found that the wisdom of knowing ourselves is the truest power we have. And through my many injuries, I've come to know so much more about myself than what I've known before. And I've been able to use that in all the videos you see. I can put a link to your viewers about all the videos that I have up there. Some of them you'd be surprised of, since old man is doing all the stuff that he's doing, but I've been surprised at what I can do simply by knowing myself, knowing, the strength that I've been able to anchor into this body, the tricks I've been able to do. These are just tricks, parlor tricks almost, if you will, that amaze people. Oh my goodness, look at this guy. But there's a philosophy behind all that that they may not see. There's a question of challenging ourselves, rising up to the challenge, challenging our beliefs. And beliefs is, if I did not believe I could do this, I could not do this. And so if I did not believe I could heal, I would not heal. And so it comes down to, one of the things I've had to understand is, how do I change my beliefs to conduct a better life than what I'm doing? And so I've gone through practices to help me understand what I believe, the limitations of those beliefs, and how to go beyond those beliefs. These are important skills in living our best lives. And again, the process I've used is not for everyone, because I'm a unique individual and people are different than me. They carry different beliefs. So I cannot give a prescription to others to do what I have done. You know, if someone wants to gain my strength, their process is going to be a little bit different than mine. If someone wants to walk around wrinkle free, well, yeah, some of this is genetics. But I learned, speaking of genetics, I've learned something different recently. I have an identical twin brother. Um, and he and I were born with the same DNA. I've been informed by my daughter that my twin brother is aging differently than I am.
Mm.
So, although we were born with the same identical DNA, epigenetics is different in our lives. Um, and so he has had different experiences, which controls different elements and turns things, different genes on and off in him than it does in me throughout our lives. So our life experiences have produced different outcomes for our health and other things. And so I'm learning a lot by looking at him and seeing the differences between us, you know, what he believes versus what I believe. So, I'm not sure, where I can go. I've also had other things. I've had eye surgery recently. I've gone blind in this eye, but even there, I've been surprised, even there, because according to what I've been told by the medical industry, once the optic nerve is damaged, it cannot repair. Well, be careful there. I'm conducting experiments with my eye doctor because it appears, at first glance, I had surgery only a year ago, it appears that my visual field is indeed improving. Now, we are about to test this because my doctor is surprised if this is the case. And so she's conducting tests on my eye to see if this is indeed happening as she suspects it is. And I'd be delighted to have the visual field in the side come back again. Although it's not going to happen right away, our bodies regenerate not instantly. Sometimes they say every 7 years we have a new body. And so I have no idea how long it will take for this visual field to come back. But I'm able to ride a motorcycle, drive, and do all the things that I need to do. Yeah. So
And, what if it's simply the belief that these things don't regenerate that creates that slowing down? Once we really truly embody that, as the soul, we are completely unlimited in
mhm.
any way, shape, or form. And our bodies take on our belief systems.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
that collective belief that this doesn't regenerate, you have this for the rest of your life now. I mean, that's a hugely ingrained belief pattern in the collective. And the quicker we can clear that out and realize this is my body is the reflection of me, who I am as a being, and I am unlimited, and I can regenerate anything.
To demonstrate that point, most of us believe that as we get older, we lose muscle mass.
Mhm.
I have never believed that, um, and have always aspired to be strong throughout my entire life. Now, I carry more muscle around than most people my age. I'm, what do you call it? What's the word you, people between 70 and 80? Well,
Yeah.
that's what I am. and and I don't reflect that, and I believe that it's because of my belief system. I continue to work out. And in fact, during the pandemic, I stopped working out a bit and lost a lot of my muscle. And when I started to work out again, I started to gain it back again. Now I'm an old man. Yeah, you may not believe this, but I'm an old man, so to speak. And I watched this muscle come back to me. I'm not finished yet. I still don't have the armor of muscle that I had 10 years ago, but still watching it come back at this age is a very interesting experiment. It destroys your belief about aging. It definitely destroys your belief about aging.
Right.
So,
And as infinite beings, do we actually have to age? Or is that an implanted belief into the collective that, if we live to be 90, like that's really a long, long life? And are we simply basically crapping out at 90 because we believe that that's what we have to do. When I was a really little girl, I had a lot of very, very expansive awarenesses as a young child. I was fully connected to source. I would just go to lay down in bed at night, and I would be just simply connected to the unified field. And it was completely obvious to me that all those people in the nursing homes, it wasn't supposed to be like that. And it was completely obvious to me in that moment that we were designed to live for far, far longer than we're living now.
You mentioned the people in nursing homes. Because of my podcast, I have a podcast called the Aging Academy, as you know, and other things that I do. I've interviewed people that are 90 years old, and I recall one interview so vividly. I fell in love with this lady. She was 90 years old, and by the time this interview was over, she and I just fell in love with each other. She had such a vibrancy around her, but I've also visited nursing homes like you, and I've seen people who are spiritually robbed of their own vitality by the information they are fed.
Exactly.
They are doing what they are told to do. From the outside. I am now 70 years old. Of course, I will have problems walking around. I am now 75 years old. My memory is going to start failing me at this point in time. My mind feels as sharp as it ever has been. And so, and I'm still trying to do more and more and more. And I want to continue that as long as I can. I'm not looking to reduce my life in any way because I'm as old as I am. I want to continue to be the athlete that I've always, and I'm trying to embrace more and more and more. This, my watching my eye come back, if indeed it is going to be a very interesting experiment. I've watched my leg come back. I've recovered from a stroke. I'm watching my eye come back. I mean, what's going on here? I'm defying all the conventional wisdoms about what should and shouldn't be, and that's fine with me.
Absolutely. And if we are, we are infinite beings.
Mhm.
And as infinite beings, how old are we? Like, do we actually even have an age?
Well, for
Is that
practical purposes, of course we do. For practical purposes, this is my 71st trip around the sun.
in this physical
That's right.
incarnation?
That's right. In
But
this physical,
as the being that we are,
I have
we're
no
infinite.
idea how old I am. I have no
Exactly.
idea how old I am. As a
Exactly.
being that I am, I have absolutely no idea how old I am. You
Exactly.
said that you were connected to source as a younger child. That younger child is just as ageless. It could be as old as the universe itself.
Exactly. In that moment, I knew that I was a very, very old soul. I knew
Yes.
that I had been here many, many, many times.
Mm.
So, and I knew instinctively that if I was an old soul, it was just clear to me that it meant that we come into these bodies and the body experience is just a temporary experience, but we continue on. So what if we all start to realize that, these bodies are far more capable than we've ever been told, and that if we really live in the present moment, we can
Mm.
live for hundreds of years. There are documented cases. I mean, more recent ones. I read a story about a gentleman in China who received every year he was, by the time he was 100, he received a 100th birthday card from the Chinese government because he had served in the army, in the Red Army. And then he received another one for his 150th birthday. And he received another one from the government on his 200th birthday. And he lived to be like 250 years old or something. I mean,
Wow.
it's a documented case.
Well,
So if one person can live to be 250 years old, we all can do the same thing because our bodies are built on the same template.
but science itself is starting to move in this direction
Exactly.
because, you know, the sciences, in fact, science and spirituality are starting to converge in many ways in many areas. Science is now admitting that the lifespan for the human is 150 years old. You know, whereas before they were saying we live to 80 years old or 90 or whatever. Now science is saying that it's quite easy for us to live to 150. You know, that they've
Sure.
all their studies says that we should be able to sustain ourselves healthfully for 150 years. And who knows, 50 years from now, they may revise that number to be 200, however they do that. But,
Exactly.
you
We've
know,
got all those stories from the Bible of people living 3,
mhm,
4, 5, 600 years. Jesus's grandmother, Anna, was
mhm.
600 years old. Like,
And you know, like it's hard for me to, all I know is what I see in the mirror, what I try to do. You know, I say that aging turns you into the person you always should have been. One of the reasons why I study aging in the way that I do and help others understand their own aging is because aging gives us something that is invaluable. Um, when I give a speech, I ask how many people want to go back 15 years in their lives and correct anything that they've done. And you get hands raised. And I say, but hold it now. If you had to use your same brain that you had back then, would you still want to go back? And some hands come down. No, I want the brain I have now to go back. Yeah. Um, and then I ask that same question in a different way. How many people like themselves more now than they did back then? And everybody says, I like myself more now. Aging gives us something that we are not valuing. We're not valuing the wisdom, the contentment, the perspective that wisdom, that aging is giving us. My daughter sometimes speaks to me about the 4 F's of life. Be careful on this one. um, and as we age, we start to understand the patterns of life around us so much more deeply in so much more satisfying ways. So she came home saying, today I learned from the 4 F's of life. Now she's 7 years old at the point I figure I should question her. What are the 4 F's of life? She says, fighting, fleeing, feeding, and mating. So as the face changes. So, but as older beings, as we get older, we understand these patterns of life so much more completely than we did when we were younger. And the older we get, the more we understand these patterns around us and can incorporate this wisdom into our life. I myself am trying to bring back the status of the wise old elder in our culture, because we have lost that in the American culture.
yeah.
Um, and Lisa, I'm sure you already know how strongly our culture affects our belief systems and everything else. You know, we don't see all the effects of our own culture inside of us, how it's limiting us.
Yeah.
I'd like to give you an example of that if I can. Between
Please.
between the American culture and the French culture, both of them are sitting at the table. When a French person finishes his meal, he says, "Je n'ai pas faim." That means I have no more hunger. When an American person finishes his meal, he says, I am full. Now, between those two phrases, which culture do you think is going to have the bigger waistline? It's a matter of culture. I have no more hunger will have produced thinner people than I am full. And we don't see this kind of effect all around us. On our health, on our finances, on our friendships and relationships. We don't see this kind of effect all around us. And so one of the things I try to do in my efforts, is try to help people understand the effects of these stereotypes on our aging, on our health, and other things. Don't be amazed at me. Explore what's inside of you. You are just as amazing as you think I am. I am no more amazing than you are. And I may not have all the wrinkles that you think I should have, but still, I am, you are no less amazing than me. Everything that I've done, you are perfectly, it's free for you as well. it's because it's just a belief system. It is simply just a belief system.
Exactly.
And so
We've never been taught to appreciate our amazingness.
that's right.
The amazingness has been beat out of us in this culture. Go get a job, go find this, you got an F on that exam, this is what's wrong with you.
Exactly.
All of these messages from the external world. We have the governments of the world, do this, do that, and we're simply controlled right out of our amazingness.
It's funny because our language, I mentioned the difference between American and French sitting at table, but our language can affect us very, very much. I
Yes.
like to teach the difference between older and old. Now, older in my context, I'm older than I was last year. This is a given. Last year I was one age, this year I'm a year older, whatever that means. But old is something that only I can do to myself. I cannot get old without my permission.
There you go.
Old is a spiritual condition. Older is a biological condition. To be old is a giving up of our spirit. To be older, well, it just takes another trip around the sun to be older. But again, I cannot get old without my permission. And I actually did see myself make myself older when I had an injury one time. Um, and this is very interesting because it was the first time I saw myself step into the realm of getting older. During a time, I was setting a world record of being the oldest person to do a particular gymnastic move. And right after I achieved that record, I had a severe injury. I tore my Achilles. And I said, I shall no longer tumble or do my gymnastics on a hard floor. And I caught myself right there. I said, that's the first time I saw myself making myself older. Because I said, I will only tumble on a trampoline track. So to protect my tendons. And I said, I will accept this limitation and hopefully it'll be the last limitation I put on myself. Because every limitation I put on myself, it's me putting them on myself, not anybody else. Every limitation I put on myself is another chink in my youth, or not youth, in me getting older or old. And so we cannot get old without our own permission. Um,
Love that.
and so, so I decided not to give myself permission to get old, to continue to be the strongest, wisest person I can. Now, for me, the value of getting older is wisdom. There is nothing more important in acquiring in our lives than wisdom. Uh, and I have so many examples in my life where my wisdom has saved me. And I will continue to, each year I add more and more wisdom to me. I know myself more and more, know who Lee Mowatt is more and more and more. And I want to help others do the same. Again, we're all different. We all have different belief systems. You yourself have been through an amazing experience, a blessing that was cancer. You now teach things that you could not teach were it not for that cancer. So, these sort of things are blessings to our lives. My accident in 2004, my stroke, they allow me to see things, to teach others in ways that I could not, were it not for these things. Even my eye injury, which was only last year, they allow me to see things that I would not have seen for this. Every challenge in our life is actually a blessing for us. We grow it is so much easier to grow in the face of challenge than it is in the face of joy. The challenge tells us where we need to adjust. Pain tells us what we need to change. And changing these things is often so beneficial to us. And we move forward in a very happy fashion. So that's what I found with all my injuries. Like I said, I've recovered from so much. And getting another thing that I had to recover from really doesn't concern me anymore. Yeah.
I love that because that allows you to live fearlessly.
Exactly, exactly.
And when we live fearlessly, it opens up so many doors. It opens up the prison doors and we fly free because it's our fears that limit us.
You will see me do handstands and headstands at the edge of bridges, and I show my other people this, and I said, "You must be stupid. You are crazy to do a handstand on the edge of that." I have a picture of me doing a handstand at the edge of the Grand Canyon. And my son took a look at that picture and says, "Dad, you are so stupid. You could kill yourself." And I said, "Of course, anything is possible, son. But when will you admit that skill is not the same as stupidity?" And so, do I trust my skill? I can trust my skill until it doesn't work, and then I die. But still, I mean, anything is possible. But why live that way? Why live in a way so that you bring on the worst possibilities to yourself? Um, and so, of course, we don't want anything to happen to us. And I tend to live an adventurous life where anything can happen, I suppose. But and people always tell me, be safely, be safe. And I feel that I am, but still, I've been doing this quite a while now, and I try to keep myself safe. And part of the thing that keeps myself safe is my own belief system. My own belief system helps me to keep myself safe. I don't want to put myself in undue danger, but I like living.
Precisely. And the more we know ourselves, we know our limitations, we know our boundaries, we
Exactly.
know instinctively when we're not safe. So
Exactly.
the better we know ourselves and our own skills and talents, the more we can push the boundaries.
Perfect. 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 That is so perfect. The more I know who I am, the more I know what I can and can't do. Right? I like to say that aging turns us into the people we always should have been. Because we tell people, we tell ourselves who we are, and each year we know ourselves more and more and more, and we can tell ourselves a different story each year as to who we are. And compassion, empathy, love, connection, these things strengthen as we get older. These are timeless qualities that we take to our grave and beyond. The true currency of life is love. And that is the true currency of life. It is not money. And so the more we live and love, the more we know who we are, and we know the world around us and can experience it in a truest manner.
I love that, because we are taught not to love ourselves. We are taught that loving ourselves is egotistical or narcissistic, or we should put everybody else first. Oh, they're so selfish.
I've struggled with that one. I have struggled with that one.
Oh, it's horrible.
It really is. Like, we have to understand that from us springs everything around us. From us, our relationships come from us. The love we give to others comes from us inside. If we don't take care of what's inside, we cannot give that love to others. The contribution we make to the world, the care we have for others comes from who we are, and loving that allows us so much more outside of here.
Exactly. Allowing ourselves to feel that love. The love has to come into our bodies. We have to feel the love first before we can give it to others. If
Absolutely. I
we
love
don't
that. I
feel
love
it,
that.
we can't give it away. Michelle is asking, can you ask Lee about fears? What does he do about fear?
Well, I appreciate that question. In fact, anyone who wants to ask a question, I would appreciate it. But fear, there are various types of fears. Fears of, if she can specify what type of fear she's talking about, but fear of danger, fear of harm, fear of ill health. You know, let's talk about fear of ill health, because that's what we're focused on here. When I feel a pain in my body that I cannot identify, do I fear that? No, I don't fear that. I know that my body is responding to something. if I were to pay attention to it, I have to figure out what it's responding to. But even that is not necessary, because as long as I am not fearful, my body will tend to take care of it. And so I may wake up morning feeling a pain somewhere in my body, and I'll say, that is very curious. I'll find out about that at another point in time. And it may never come back again. My body may have already taken care of it. My body is healed from so much already. Another pain is not a problem for me, and they never last. This is the thing I'm always surprised at. Every pain that I've ever noticed in my body has never lasted.
Right.
The body tends to take care of these things as long as you hold your mind and your spirit correctly, because it all comes from the mind and the spirit.
Right. And the thing that I have learned that has been so incredibly helpful to me as far as the mindset of pain is concerned, healing is the painful part.
Mm,
Because healing means that if you're at one level and you need to be at a different level, the healing is the raising up to the proper level. So there's a change in the body. So that means that the body has to restructure itself. And just like if you buy an old home and you want to fix it up, you want to restructure
good
that house,
example.
that's the painful part. You got to rip everything out. There's hammering and banging and noise and dust and dirt. Well, the body has to rebuild itself, just like you would have to rebuild a house. So the painful
Great
part
example.
is
Great
the
example.
healing. So when I find a pain in my body, I always go, oh, thank you, body, for healing. I appreciate this.
You bring up a good point, because the pains we feel in our body don't cause fear. They cause conversation between me and my body.
There
You
you
know,
go.
what's going on down there? Why is that leg behaving this way? And I will have a subjective conversation between me and my leg, or me and my, wherever the pain is. And we will talk to each other. Now, some people will challenge this, of course. How can you talk to your heart, for example, or your stomach, or whatever it is, and but you do.
Absolutely. Yes. Every single molecule of your body is listening. Every
Exactly.
single cell is listening to every single thought.
To demonstrate that, what I would, during the 7 years where I carried that open wound, I said to that leg, give me what I need. I will give you whatever it is you need, but please give me what I need to continue using you. Whatever you need, I will give you. I didn't know what that was, but
Mhm.
I would intuitively give that leg whatever it needed in order for it to give me what I needed. And he came back. It came back. I'm now taking that same process with my eye, and my doctors are now curious. Is this eye coming back? It's not supposed to, and so,
Says who?
yeah, exactly.
Says
So,
who? Who made that rule that our
yeah.
bodies, where did that come from? That our
Well,
bodies don't regenerate?
Well, see, in the case of certain, scientists, doctors say that certain nerves don't regenerate very easily, but the whole body regenerates. The whole body
Exactly.
regenerates. So,
Yeah.
so if my optic nerve is damaged right now, well, wait a year or two, then see how it is. I've waited 7 years to have this wound close up on me, right? That was some years ago, and I've been using it. I went through 7 years of pain, unable to walk long distances. Now I can walk for miles, and this comes from the body's regenerated itself. The body is now healthy again, and watching this. And then what I used to put on this performance in the gym. I used to lift these weights, and for my legs, et cetera, and just pack on weights. And I teach people how to use these weight machines. And then at the end of that demonstration, I would tell them, by the way, I have a severed leg. So, what is your excuse? Of course, it's no longer severed. It's been reattached and all the rest of that stuff. But it just freaks them out when they see what I do, and they know the stuff I've been through in terms of injury and stuff like that. But like my ability to recover is no different than your ability to recover. You recover from cancer. You know, the challenge of cancer is just as bad as any challenge I've ever faced. In fact,
Right. And that's really sad in some respect, because we have been taught to fear these things. You know, the medical community has put labels, these scary names on
mm,
normal physical, biological responses.
mm,
And by putting those names on, it puts those responses in a box and says, well, this is the way that box is going to play out.
that's
And a
right.
lot of times they put the name on the box and say, this box, you have a 3-year lifespan. And all of a sudden, people go into absolute terror, and
Mm,
they don't, a lot of them can't get themselves back out of that box. They can't get into the mindset of, my body is just going to regenerate. So I look forward to the day when we take all of those labels off and we start to listen to our bodies, and we start to understand that our bodies are always on our side, and they are
always,
always
always on our side.
rejuvenating themselves and regenerating themselves. They are never broken. They are never trapped. And it is simply that mindset. When we believe
That
somebody,
mindset is very important. I'd like to give you an example of that, or illustration of that mindset and how that works. Um, the medical industry, whenever it does an experiment, has a control group and one who gets the real drug, and when it's testing out these drugs and stuff like that. Well, the control group gets a placebo. And they say this will cure your headache, and then the real group gets the real drug. Well, they find that in the control group, about 30% have a cure called the placebo effect. And so because they are told that the pill will cure the headache, it's just a sugar pill, but it actually does. Whereas then they want the control group to have a greater effect in order to have it validated as a drug. So now we have a placebo, but we have placebo in our environment in reverse. We are told that we will lose muscle mass. We are told that we will lose cognitive abilities. We are told that we will this is the same placebo in reverse.
the nocebo effect.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
And so most of us are succumbing to the placebo effect that sits all around our culture. And and one of the things I teach is how to distance ourselves from these kinds of placebo stereotypes, because to distance ourselves is to gain our own power. And you hit it, when we label these things, people automatically accept these labels and
exactly.
they use them for their own disadvantage.
Exactly. When we look at the TV and we see commercial after commercial after commercial for new drug after new drug, for new label after new label after new label, how long is it going to take people to understand that the labels are invented so that
They are.
they can sell new drugs, because it's a multi-billion-dollar business.
So
Without the labels, they don't have any use for the drugs.
one of the things I'm trying to create different types of images in our environment about aging. And I'm trying to inspire a different image for aging entirely. And so I've gathered a bunch of people called silver inspirations, trying to be one myself. The older people who have defied what older people are like, so that other people, younger and older, can get a different idea and different aspirational idea of what they themselves can do. Here I am, being as old as I am, and I call myself an old man, but uh,
A wise man.
but if we can see how vital age can be, and you don't have to be physically vital, spiritually vital, is just as valid as physically vital. Like I said, I've interviewed 90-year-olds that I fell in love with. They're spiritually vital individuals. They're youthful, they play, they joke, they have a smile about themselves. I'd like to mention a few tips that I use for myself to remind myself that I am young, not young. I don't like to use the word young because the goal is not being young. The goal for me is not being old. And so I don't like to use the word young because that implies inexperience, whereas I consider myself extremely experienced. But I like to go through a few tricks that I use almost on a daily basis to keep myself vital. And one is posture. Um, I have this trick, this mental trick that I use to keep my posture intact. Our wisdom is what we gain as we get older, and that wisdom comes from a light in our chest. To show the world that light from your chest, you must stand up. When you stand up and show the world that light from your chest, you automatically fix your posture. When your posture is fixed, energy flows from top to bottom much more easily. So the first thing I try and have people do is shine their light from their chest into the world. That automatically fixes their posture. The next thing I try to do with someone who I'm working with is to help them understand that in the lungs, most of the capillaries that take in oxygen to the blood are sitting at the bottom of the lungs. And so belly breathing rather than shallow breathing is, so always make sure that when you're breathing, you're feeling it in your belly. These things will help you, give you more vitality. You're taking in more energy, more oxygen to this thing. The next thing I try and have people do is to make sure their social circles expand 20 years older and 20 years younger than they are, right? In order to get that perspective and that, that connection into the world, the philosophical connection into the world that's broad and expansive, that keeps them vital with ideas that flow through their own spirit. And so, but in other words, I'm building up a set of philosophical tools that help us remind who we are as we get older and older, not old, older and older. So these tools, these philosophical tools, help us to stay who we want to be. So, again, this is still in progress as part of my work, as I help others understand as they question me. To answer the question of fears is a very important one. The person who asked that question, fears can be so overpowering, which is how we're controlled. If we want to sell insurance, we must create fear. If we want to, anything that has a profit in it has a fear component in it. In order to get someone to do something, people are driven by fear more than they're driven by its opposite. And the marketers understand this. An environment without fear is much more difficult to control than an environment that is fearful. And so, and you can see this in our politics already, this prevalent in our politics, just instill fear and you have control, and so, try to understand your own fears. You may be able to free yourself if you can understand what you're fearing. Ask yourself the opposite question. My mother was very paranoid and she had 7 locks on her door. And I asked her one day, how many locks do you really need? What happens if there's only one there? What happens if there's none? Now, I'm not fearful of things like that at all. And I live a very free life that way. I don't, I'm not pent up in that manner. And I'm very open to people around me, to other things. The pains in my body, I do not fear that. The body is trying to communicate with me and I want to listen. Financial fear, well, we address that in many ways. Abundance is always around us. And, it's all we have to do is tap into it. And learning how to do that is a process unto itself. We've been brought up in a culture where a lot of this has been taken away from us. And now we have to take it back, and learning how to take it back is not always easy depending on how much we've been infected by it. And so, and I run across a person who's been so captivated by the stereotypes that they cannot free themselves. It's a very strong hold that they have, that the stereotypes have on them. And all I can do is hold them, because they cannot free themselves from the stereotypes that they've adopted. Um, you, Lisa, have gone through a very fortunate experience of cancer.
Mhm.
I've gone through many accidents, strokes, and each one has taught me such a valuable lesson. It's not that I welcome them. God, I
Right,
don't.
exactly.
I don't welcome them at all, but I will use every single one of them to teach me every lesson that I can learn. So, it's, again, I want to help others understand that aging is absolutely nothing to fear. In fact, my best years up to this point has been after 50. You know, Before 50, I was a child. I was a child, not knowing much of anything. And that's why I like to say that aging turns you into the person you always should have been. Understanding compassion, love, the heart of another person, understanding the world, what my daughter called the 4 F's of life. um, you know, Understanding these things comes with wisdom. Wisdom comes with age. You do not see 17-year-olds that are full of compassion as many times as you see a 90-year-old that is full of compassion for the world and everyone around, because we've learned to handle our destructive emotions. Our destructive emotions can take so much away from us, and aging gives us tools to handle these destructive emotions better. Yeah, we understand our mind, what our mind can do to us, how our mind can capture us. So, again, this is all part of the aging process. The aging process makes us better and better people inside of ourselves and to the world. And that's what I'm trying to promote with my Aging Academy and the podcast and the messages that I promote. It's not about the videos and the amazing things you see this man do. There's a strong spiritual component to what I do and say. And if all you want to do is ogle my muscles, well, I'm fine. I mean, but still, it's a spiritual component here that I value so much more, because that's what aging is really all about. Developing our power as humans.
Exactly.
Not as
Connection to the
athletes. I
soul.
mean, I happen to be an athlete, but that's not aging. I'm not going to be an athlete forever. I have to accept that. I will be an athlete as long as I can. And if that's forever, fine, I'm good with that. But it'll be for as long as I can make it. But I've accepted the fact that it is my wisdom and spiritual connection to the world that is eternal. And I will use my aging each year to deepen that and do more amazing things as well. Yeah. So
Beautiful. We love that. Michelle's asking, does your sword have a special meaning? There's a sword hanging on.
um
Wow.
no, it represents a story that when I first got that sword, turned to my son. I was living in the country at the time, and I struck it deep into the ground. I called my son over and says, when you can take that sword out of the ground from where I put it, then you can fill my shoes. So other than that, it's just it was a gift given to me by my daughter. Yeah. In fact, I have other swords hanging around the place, and all the swords hanging around my place were given to me by my daughter. And so, who somehow thinks I'm a warrior of some sort.
She's a very wise woman.
So, but I've enjoyed this quest that I'm on to understand who I am, to understand what the environment is doing to those around me, to see how that can be counteracted. I've appreciated your message and your experiences. Your cancer has been instrumental to you and me and others. You are now doing the work of good. And in my Aging Academy, my podcast, speaking to older people, helping them understand who they are and who they are not, is very important to me. I want to empower the world to embrace aging, because there's so much there that we're not taking advantage. Do you realize the tremendous natural resource that we have in our older individuals and our older citizens? The wisdom that's sitting there that we're not taking advantage of because we've marginalized older people, right? Well, I refuse to be marginalized. And I'm trying to help our environment and other people to empower aging so that we can take advantage of what is sitting there. And, again, we don't have to grow old and get sick. We can serve our community, serve our culture, and provide wisdom and humanity for that culture. That is what aging is all about. The wise old elder is a status that I'm trying to reestablish in our culture. Uh, and I would like to be one of those wise old elders, and I'd like as many people to join me as they possibly can. A set of silver inspirations for others to look up to move their forward path, and to see what's possible as we get older and older, and to not fear aging. Aging is absolutely nothing to fear. Whatever happens to me as I get older and older, it is perfectly acceptable. Perfectly acceptable. If I find a place where it's difficult for me to move or something like that, that's perfectly. Acceptance is a part of wisdom. Acceptance is a part of wisdom. And I'm perfectly accepting of who I am as much as I can be, what I can and can't do. It's all in front of me, and I want to embrace it all gracefully, and gently. Gently handling the world is part of my goal now. When I was younger, I was a harsh little boy. And to see that transformation, it was almost like in my accident, 2004, the person that went into that accident is not the same person who came out of that accident. I saw myself die in that accident. Lisa, as you already know, you don't see yourself die and come out the same person. And the person that came out of that accident was a very different person who came into that accident. All the records that I've set, all the videos that you've seen, is after that accident when I understood more clearly who I am and what that power that I have is. And that power is nothing special that anyone else doesn't have. Exactly. And so, and I try and encourage other people, don't gawk at me, don't be in awe of me, because you are the same. You are the same. Whatever I have done, you may not be able to do a handstand, fine, big deal. Life isn't about handstands and doing iron crosses on the rings and stuff. That's not what life is all about. Yeah, it's amazing. Okay, fine, I'll give you that. But and it's fun too. It's I have a lot of fun doing that stuff. It's the way I enjoy myself. But still, life is about compassion, love, connection. Life is about wisdom and helping others, and to see the world as it truly is, to rise above, no matter how old you are, to rise above the culture. The culture tends to put you down, and that putting down is becoming so obvious to me as I look around myself and gain the wisdom that I do, that aging is giving me. And so I don't know how more strongly to say what I'm trying to say, but to embrace our aging. There is nothing here to fear. I am looking forward to the next 10 and 20 years to see what it'll be like. It's all a mystery to me. It's all a mystery to me. And I'm looking forward to expressing and seeing that mystery. And so I will do everything I can. That's all I can say. And so
I love that. This is such an incredible conversation. I've been so looking forward to speaking with you, and I knew that you would be such an inspiration to our listeners. And I do hope you'll come back at some other time so we can have some more of these conversations.
I would love to come back. I have very many topics that I have not touched here, and we can make space for some of those. We can talk offline about that. But I want to leave your listeners with an appreciation for what getting older is all about, and never fear it. Even if we have to increase our wrinkle collection, I say. In fact, one store I go into, they bother me because I never bring my full wrinkle collection.
That's cute.
but like, we have to ask questions of ourselves. And my mind tends, I've always been a very inquisitive individual. And I ask these strange questions that I don't know where they come from. One question I've been asking quite recently, which really doesn't seem to have a relevance, is why does the word wrinkle start with a W instead of an R? How did that happen? How did that happen? I have no idea why W got substituted there instead of an R. But I have no idea the history of that. But these are just stupid questions that come up in my mind. But these questions, I live my life through questions. Question what you believe. That is the point.
Yeah.
Question what you believe.
Question
Why
your
do you
limitation.
believe what you believe? What is the consequence of believing that? What is the consequence of believing that I can go on forever? Well, that's better than the consequence of believing that I cannot. And so how much can I put that into effect? How do I change my own belief system? I have a whole series that I teach about how to change your belief systems, because we live from our belief systems. So the question often comes up, well, how do we change our belief systems for the better? Well, I have a whole series of exercises that I have people understand about how to change their belief systems. We can talk about that at another system, because that is a big topic.
That would be a great topic.
Changing our belief systems from one to another would be a very good topic for us to talk about.
For certain, that would be great.
Because as you have said, things happen through the body, not to the body. I love whenever I hear you say that. I love it. I've heard you say that several times, and I love it every single time. Things happen through this body, not to this body. And our belief systems are the conduit for that. So how do we change our belief systems so that different things happen through this body? Well, I've started to study that, and I've come up with a system for changing my own belief systems that have apparently worked for a few others as well. And I'd like to start teaching that as well.
Fabulous. We'll have to have you back on so that we can change our beliefs about aging.
It's funny because changing our beliefs are it's not easy to change our beliefs, especially when we've held them for such a long period of time. We become invested in our own belief system.
Yeah.
And so change them we have to define something about what's sitting there in order to change them. We have to go against what we have ourselves have put there. So there's a challenge in changing our belief systems, but it's not an insurmountable challenge at all. Not at all. And in fact, if we hold ourselves in a particular way, it can be fairly easy to change our belief systems depending on our desires.
Exactly. That's where I've gotten to that point where I am ready to just release anything that doesn't serve me, any belief system. I am not married to any belief system. If it doesn't empower me, it's gone.
Like I need to support the person I want to be, not this person that I've been taught to be. What I've been taught is not what I want to learn.
Exactly.
I want to learn how to grow older gracefully. I want to grow older powerfully. I want to be an example of what growing older can be. I used to say, I will be your pioneer for growing older. Who taught us how to grow older in this culture? No one did. And the results of not knowing are tremendous. Poverty, loneliness, isolation. These are the results of not knowing how to grow older in this culture. And so I want to teach people, and will be the pioneer for how to grow older in this culture by connection, love, power, worth, nutrition, et cetera, et cetera. And I want to be a young boy, so to speak. That's in quotes, because I will never be a young boy anymore. That's okay. I'm good with that. I will always be youthful. I will never be young. I will always play. And playing is what makes us, I will always carry a smile on my face. I always want to connect to another heart. I will always want adventure in my life. However old I am, when would I not want adventure?
Right? Exactly.
So
All of that has been just, beaten out of us in this
exactly,
society. The
exactly.
ability to play, work has taken over play, and
Mhm.
yeah, it has ruined the adventure of life for
Exactly.
many people. Yeah.
And so, I mean, I certainly appreciate, I have to appreciate my own physique, et cetera, because a lot of people come to me simply because of the physique, and, um, but that's not the thing, that's not the strongest thing I bring to any connection, to any education. It's not my physique. People come to me looking at my muscles, that's a different situation. I may be unique with my muscles, but especially for my age, you don't normally see a person my age walking around with this type of muscle, but still, that's not the important thing. You don't have to have these muscles in order to grow older wisely and healthfully, and to be fully capable of who you are as a person. And so to maintain your cognitive ability, your physical ability, and you don't have to be a Lee Mowatt to do any of that. So, so
No, we just each have to be ourselves.
exactly,
We are
exactly.
each amazing and powerful beyond our current level of awareness.
I definitely agree. And so, we are controlled by our beliefs, as I said before, and the beliefs they want to give us are not the beliefs we should have, in my opinion.
Exactly.
And so we are taught from our education system, from our medical system, from, science is proving now that the aging brain has many advantages that the young brain does not. And I'm discovering all of this myself in my own personal life. So I give many demonstrations of what the aging brain is capable of. And again, these are tricks that say, oh, he's a special person. I'm not a special person. I have everything that you have. And so I'm not a special person. Whatever I do is available to everyone else as well.
Exactly. We love that. You're setting such a beautiful example so that a shining star, so that everyone can see their own light from
It's
their
simple.
own hearts.
Exactly. It's your
Thank you
own life.
so much for sharing your light with us today, Lee. It's just been such an amazing conversation, so inspirational to everyone. Michelle says he is a warrior. So we love that.
It's funny you say a warrior. My one of my son's friends asked me what field am I in. He was watching me mow the lawn. I had my shirt off, and he says, "What does your father do for a living?" He says, "My father's in computers." And he watched me mow the lawn a little bit longer. And he says, "Why does he need muscles for computers?" It says he doesn't. He doesn't need muscles for computers. And the guy who's a young boy at the time said, "You must be able to beat up anybody." I said, "These muscles are not for fighting. These muscles are not for fighting. I want to get along with people, not fight them." And so, they're for my own use, not for fighting. So
That's right. And what's the most important muscle? That heart.
that heart is the most important muscle. That
Living from that love.
exactly. It's from
Yeah,
here. It's from here. Understanding who you are and who others are.
exactly.
Understand, you have to treat others with compassion because they've been taught a belief system that doesn't always work for them. They
Yes,
are still doing the best they can do in the face of that belief system. You have to have
exactly.
compassion for what they have been taught that may not be correct. Um,
Exactly. Those limiting belief systems, they shut our hearts down and we
mm,
stop living from that self-love and the love for others. And it just starts depleting our life force energy. It's
absolutely,
like
absolutely.
opening that heart back up, allowing the light to shine, allowing our love to shine, allowing ourselves to feel that love. That's where
Important,
that
important.
brings that life force energy back. And we
Absolutely.
start living
I
from
like that. I like that so much. When we are fearful, we build walls around ourselves. We
yes,
constrict. When we are happy and joyful, we expand.
exactly.
I give the following example to help people understand this. I say, imagine you just won the lottery Imagine that day that you just won the lottery, you found out you just won the lottery. Imagine how happy you would be. That day, at least, would be a very good day. Now, imagine you lived every day that happy. Can you imagine how healthy you would be if you
Exactly.
if you lived every day as if you just won the lottery? But in effect, you have. In
Right.
effect, every day you're able to win that lottery every single day and find that health that you are seeking. So, because negative emotions suppress your life force, positive emotions build it. Whatever causes
Precisely.
you to expand into the world helps you to live better. Whatever causes you to restrict shuts you down. So,
Exactly. Yep. Love is that life force energy. So as long as we are open-hearted and flowing our passion and joy and enthusiasm, that life force energy, there is no end to that source.
I'm gonna do something for a second. Let me see. People have been looking at this. This sword is as tall as I am almost.
Wow, that's amazing.
I just thought I'd take it down off the wall.
Thanks for showing us that, Lee. That is beautiful. So Lee, this has been such an amazing conversation. You're such a fabulous guest. We're so happy to have you here with us today. And we look forward to having you come back so we can talk about changing our limiting beliefs.
Yeah, that's a topic that's becoming very important to me because I know so many people are struggling with their own beliefs and are caught inside of them.
Exactly.
And so I myself am devising a system that helps certain types of people, people in general, to change their beliefs and that set of exercises and progress through those exercises to help change your beliefs to something that's more suitable to you.
Great. Well, we will definitely have you back to explore that topic. It's going to be amazing.
I look
So,
forward to
Lee,
it.
how can people get in touch with you if they want to learn more, listen to your podcast?
Okay, you can get in touch with me by emailing me at Lee. Oh, Lee. Lee at theagingacademy.com, all one word, no spaces. You can see me on YouTube. I can put a link here so you can see all the videos that I put there. You can be amazed by all that stuff.
Beautiful. And I'll put Lee's links in the Facebook group and in the show notes on YouTube as well.
Okay. Other than that, my regular email address is just lee.mowat490@gmail.com. But I prefer you to get in touch with me via the Aging Academy. That's the email I tend to use for business and things of this sort. So listen to the podcast. The podcast tends to talk about topics that are relevant to older people. They don't. I try and stay away from the topic of fitness because I try to move people away from being so fascinated with my fitness elements. Although I do show off a bit,
Great.
I mean, how do I can't help but show off, but 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 still, that's not the important part of my message, and so that's just some ego gratification that's still left behind.
So your podcast is called The Aging Academy. So look for that, everybody. And this is beautiful. So Lee, thank you so much. Like I say, we'll put all of your links in both the Facebook group and on the YouTube description.
Sure. I'll fill you in with more links as we after we get off here, so that you can do that as you wish.
Perfect.
Lisa, this has been wonderful. You yourself are doing an amazing job of teaching. Like I said to you earlier before we started, your cancer was a blessing to you. My stroke was a blessing to me. My accidents these challenges that we all face in our lives can be true blessings to us. People tend to be devastated by bad events, but these are beautiful ways to reset and adjust our lives. And I tend to try and use them that way. You have done that with your cancer, with a book, and now with solutions. So all this comes out of your cancer.
Yeah. Well, we just want to get everybody connected back to the soul, because the soul is the solution. It is who we are. And when we remember who we are, we open up to the brilliance and the love that we each are. And so we want everybody to be the very best version of themselves that they can be.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So thank you all so much for listening today. And until next week, we wish for you a great week. And we will be back next Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern in Soul Sourced Healing on Facebook for another episode of Solution Sunday, because the soul is the solution. So thank you so much, Lee, and we'll definitely have you back.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I enjoyed it.
All right, great. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week. Bye for now.